Hello everyone, I'm Estefania. Are you ready for a Visual Studio Code crash course? Visual Studio Code is a really awesome tool, a really awesome code editor that you can work with to write and run your code. I will be using Visual Studio Code for most of my videos, so by the end of this course you will have a really good understanding of how to work with this amazing tool. If you like this video, I really appreciate your likes and subscribe to find more videos like this on my channel. Are you ready? Let's begin! First, we have to download Visual Studio Code. And for that, we go to code.visualstudio.com. You will see a homepage like this, where you can immediately detect a button to download Visual Studio Code for Windows. You can click right here and your download will start. You will see things for downloading VS Code for Windows. If it doesn't start, you can try this direct download link. You will see that the download starts right here at the bottom. If you are curious of the size of the download, currently it is 76.2 megabytes. Okay, so it's not so large. Okay, I already have it installed, but you would finish downloading that and then you would double click on the executable file and install it. It's really straightforward, and if you have any questions during the installation process, don't hesitate to ask in the comments. Great, and I also wanted to mention that if you are working with another platform like Linux or Mac OS, you can click right here in other platforms and you will see other options for Linux and for Mac OS. Now you know how to download Visual Studio Code, but once you install it, you will see something like this. This is Visual Studio Code. First of all, let's see the layout. Right here, we have the main panel or the main area where you will see all the files that you currently have opened and their content, all the lines of code. Right here. Then on this left-hand side, we have something that is called the activity bar. You can hide it or show it by clicking right here on View, Appearance, and then Show Activity Bar. You can hide it or you can show it. Okay, so it's really helpful. It has awesome options like an explorer where you can see the different files in a folder. You have search, you have source control where you can work with Git and other version control systems. You can also run a debugger and you can install extensions. That is something that is really great about Visual Studio Code. It has tons of extensions that you can install to make your work even more productive. Here you can see your accounts, and this is a button to manage your settings. Different options right here. Okay, we will go through the settings and which ones you would like to customize first in just a few moments. Great. Now you know this, the activity bar and the main panel. We also have this, like the menu with different options: File, Edit, Selection, View, Go, Run, Terminal, and Help. Here in File, you can see New File. This is how you can create a new file. So let's do that. The first thing that you will see is the shortcuts, and the Visual Studio Code symbol is replaced by a file. Right now the file is empty, okay? This is why you can see Untitled in the tab. Once you save the file and you assign a name to the file, you will see the name of the file right here. And this is just like a placeholder text that you will see initially when you create a file. You can select a language to get started to have that syntax highlighting that we really love when we are coding. And you can just say, for example, HTML, and you select HTML or any other programming language that you want to work with. But that will also be assigned automatically when you save your file with a particular extension. And you can also choose not to show this message ever again if you click right here. But if you press enter, that text will disappear. If you see this little circle, white circle next to the name of the file, that means that the file has been changed or modified and the changes have not been saved. So let's see how you can save the file. You go to File and then click on Save. The shortcut to do this is Ctrl+S. You can also select Save As, but initially the first time you save the file, both of them will work exactly the same. The shortcut for Save As is Ctrl-Shift-S. We click on Save and then we go to the path where we want to save our file, where we want to keep our file. In this case, I am storing the file in Documents/YouTube Videos, but you can choose any path that you like. You can see Untitled 1, which is the name that VS Code assigns to the videos. Let's give it a name, for example, index.html. This will be an HTML file, and you will see that VS Code automatically assigns the syntax highlighting that corresponds to HTML, which is really awesome. You only need to write this extension. Even if this says plain text, if you add the extension, the file will be an HTML file. So we click on Save, and now you can see right here that the name of the file has changed to index.html. You can also see the name right here. And this is the path to the file. The lines in the file are numbered. Right now we have 6 empty lines, but we can delete these lines and start writing the content of the file. For example, doc type HTML. Right here we can write something inside the file just to show you how you would see the code inside a file. My file, hello world. It's just a really basic HTML file to show you how this works. You can see that we automatically have the syntax highlighting for HTML. And the same would happen if you have a JavaScript file or a PHP file or a Python file. Okay? Visual Studio Code is really awesome with that. Now we see that we have unsaved changes because we have the little white circle right here next to the name. We can save it with Ctrl-S or by clicking right here on Save. Awesome! Now you know how to create a file and how to save a file. Now let's see how you can open an existing file. You go to File and then you click on Open File. The shortcut for this is Ctrl-O, okay? So you can use that shortcut as well. We click on Open File, and then you go to the file that you want to open, and you can either double click on it or just click once and then click Open. Both ways will work. And there you have it. Right here we can see the file and its content. Awesome, right? You can have more than one file open at the same time, and you would just see like little tabs right here. Let's see that. If we create a new file, you can see that we have 2 tabs and that we can change from one file to another. Let's say, for example, that we have a styles.css file. I save the file and I write a rule like H1. Font size 10 pixels. Okay. And we can jump from one file to another by just clicking on their tabs. Awesome. Now there's something that I know you might have noticed when I created the CSS file and wrote the rule. That VS Code automatically adds 4 spaces per level of indentation. Let me show you this. We have 4 spaces per level of indentation. And usually in some languages like HTML, like CSS, and in some programming languages like Java, we typically use 2 spaces. How can we change this? Well, we just go here to this little bar at the bottom and we click where it says spaces. You will see the value 4 by default. If you click on it, you will see this little menu where it says indent using spaces or indent using tabs. We usually work with spaces. You can also choose tabs. If you click on spaces, you will see how many spaces you want to have for each tab or each tab size, the tab size, okay? By default, it is 4, but we can choose to have 2. And right now you can see that the lines, the white lines, are indicating us that now we have 2 tabs, or the equivalent of 2 tabs in Spaces. So we can revert that, and now if we use the tab, we will have 2 spaces instead of 1 tab, okay? 2 spaces per level of indentation. And that is super helpful for languages like HTML and CSS and JavaScript. With Python, we usually work with 4 spaces, so you can leave that as the default. Awesome. Another very important operation is how to open a folder in Visual Studio Code. Because usually when you're working on a project, for example, when you're working on a React project, you will have many files. You're not going to work with the individual files. It's much easier to just see the entire structure of the project in the folder. So let's see how you can do that. Let's close these files and open a folder. You go to File and you click on Open Folder. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts Ctrl-K and Ctrl-O. And that will open this little panel right here, where you can select your folder. What you would do is just navigate to the folder that you want to open. In this case, I am inside YouTube videos, inside this folder. Since I'm inside the folder, I can select the folder. You have to be inside the folder. You click on Select Folder, and that's it. It will take a few seconds, but you will see the folder opened right here. In the Explorer, you will see that the Explorer turns white. Now, let's take a look at this structure that we have right here. We see the name of the folder that we opened, YouTube videos, and we also see that name right here at the top. If we click on this arrow, we can hide the content of the folder if we don't want to see it. Okay? But if we do, we can see the 2 files that are currently in that folder and their extensions. To open either one of the files, we just click on it. If you click on it just once, you will see that the name of the file is like in italic. And if you click on another file, you will only get 1 file at a time. The current file will be replaced in this part of the view with another file. To keep a file permanently opened until you decide to close it, you have to double click on it. And when you see that the name is no longer in italic, that means that you will be able to open another file, like in this case. So you should double click on the file to have the file open permanently until you decide to close it. Now you know how to open a folder and how to open the files in that folder. You can create a folder inside this folder if you need to, directly from the Explorer. You just click here where it says New Folder. You can create a new file or a new folder. Either one of them will work basically the same way. Right here you have your new folder, and let's call it like My Files. I'm just separating the words with a hyphen. This depends on the language that you're working with and the style that you're working with. But just to show you the principles of how you can create a folder, let's click Enter. If you were creating a file, all you have to do is just add the extension, the type of file that you're creating, and the process is exactly the same. So now you can see that I have a folder. And how can you detect that this is a folder visually? Well, because you have this little arrow right here. The arrow tells you that this is a folder that can be like opened visually. Let's see how this works. If I want to have, for example, this file, the CSS file, inside this folder, I can just drag it to the folder and confirm that I want to move the file. Okay, so now we see that the file is a little bit more indented to the right than the HTML file. This difference in the indentation tells you that the file is inside this folder. And we can close the folder if we don't need to see its content. And we can also open it if we do want to see the files that are currently inside the folder. Okay, so this is basically how files work like this. I will show you how to create a new file because I really think that this is important. If I click on the main folder right here, somewhere in the Explorer and on the main folder, YouTube videos, I can create a new file. And let's say that I want to call it style.css. I just write the name of the file with the extension and press enter. And now I have my brand new CSS file. Awesome, right? We have two CSS files right now, so we better delete one. And that is a great opportunity to show you how you can delete a file and a folder directly from Visual Studio Code. If you want to delete this file, style.css, you just right-click on it and you click on delete. You can also do that with the delete key, and you can rename the file as well. You can choose either one of the options. Those are super helpful. You will have to confirm if you want to delete the file. This will save you a lot of bad clicks and key presses, okay? This will really save your life, this confirmation during a project, so you don't end up deleting a file that you don't want to delete. And now, if I want to move this file from the My Files folder to the main folder, all I have to do is just drag it to the main folder and confirm that I want to move styles.css into YouTube videos. Great! Now my folder is empty. I don't see any files inside the folder, so I can just delete the folder. Right-click on it and delete it. Great, I still have my two files, and now you know all the basic operations that you can perform in the Explorer. There are also two other symbols or icons right here that you can click on. This option refreshes the Explorer, so if you made any changes to this folder directly in the File Explorer instead of Visual Studio Code and that change hasn't been reflected, you can try to click right here, Refresh Explorer. And then we have this last option, which is Collapse Folders in Explorer. This will basically close all the folders that you have in the Explorer. If we had multiple folders opened, this would just close all of them, and you can choose which ones you would like to keep open, but you will have to do that manually. It's also very helpful when you're working with large projects, like for example React projects, where you have an initial structure with many files. Great, now let's talk a little bit about editor groups. Okay, great. So now let's talk a little bit about editor groups. Editor groups are a super cool feature that the developers of Visual Studio Code included to make our lives much easier. Let me show you. If we close the Explorer right here, we can close it by clicking here. We can toggle the Explorer. You will see that we still have our two files. And this is the content of our files. But sometimes when you are working, for example, with HTML and CSS that go hand in hand, they work together, you might want to see both files simultaneously without having to click on the tabs like 100 times while you're making changes to the code. If you don't want to click like 100 times to jump between the files, what you can do is just create a separate editor group. And that will show you the two files at the same time. Let's see how you can do this. You just open the files, and then you drag the tab. You click right here with the left mouse click. You drag it, and then you will see that this panel becomes white, turns white. But wait until you drag it enough to see that this part of the panel, only the right half of the panel becomes white. You just drop it there and voila. Right here you can see that we have the two files simultaneously. We have them both in the same window at the same time, so we can make changes simultaneously. We don't have to click on the tabs like 100 times to make the different changes. And that is really awesome and a true time-saving feature. Great, so each one of these panels is called an editor group because you can have multiple files in each group, as they call it. You can create, for example, a file here, or you can create a file here, and you can have multiple files opened per editor group. Okay, and you can close them and you can work with them independently like you would if we only had one editor group. So that's really helpful. You can also change the size of the editor groups based on what you need. A really helpful shortcut to jump between editor groups is Control plus a number. For example, if I press Control 1, you can see that now the focus is on editor group number 1 from left to right. This would be 1, this would be 2, and if we had a third one, that one would be 3. If we press Control 2, now we see that the focus turns to editor group 2 with stylus.css. So it's just a shorter, faster way to jump between the editor groups. That is a super helpful shortcut. Great, so let's get things back to normal by dragging the file to the main editor group that we have. And now let's talk a little bit about the settings of Visual Studio Code. There are certain settings that you might like to customize initially before you start working with Visual Studio Code. So let's go over the main ones. I personally like to adjust the zoom or the size of my code with my mouse wheel. And that is possible in Visual Studio Code. With just Control and the mouse wheel, you can adjust the size of the code. This is very helpful if, for example, you wear glasses, or you really want to focus on a particular part of the code, or just I really think it's helpful to make your life much easier during long coding hours. So let's see how you can configure this in your settings. To open your settings, let's close the Explorer and open the settings. You go to File, Preferences, and then Settings. The shortcut is Control plus comma. Okay, so now we have the settings. You can see that it is like a tab that we have next to the files. So we can also rearrange this. We have a search bar in the settings that makes our lives much easier when we're trying to find a particular setting because there are hundreds of settings. Okay? Some commonly used settings include autosave. If you want to autosave your code, I currently have it off, but you can also turn it on right here after a delay on focus change or on window change. We have the font size. I particularly like to adjust this with my mouse wheel, but you can also set it as the default. Font family, the tab size, which you can customize like you learned just a few minutes ago on the panel at the bottom of the file. And well, we have the cursor style. We have other very helpful settings that you might like to go over and customize according to your liking. Now, for the mouse wheel, let's type here, let's enter zoom. And that will immediately pop up this setting, which is really important, mouse wheel zoom. If you check this option, you will see that it will zoom the front of the editor when using the mouse wheel and holding Control. That is what I have been doing so far during the video, like this, okay? I just press Control and scroll the mouse wheel. Great! Now you know how to do this. We also have something called the minimap, which is something that I wanted to show you in case you want to keep it or hide it. If you write minimap right here, you will see the setting minimap. Right now, I don't have it checked, but if I do check this setting, if I do activate or enable this setting, I will see something like this right here, which is, like its name indicates, a minimap. It is like a miniature version of your code that you can use to scroll down really quickly when you have a really long file. So you can just grab this and click on it and drag it to move around your file. That's really helpful when you're working with a file that has hundreds or thousands of lines of code. Awesome! Now you know how to activate the minimap. I think it usually comes activated by default. So if you want to hide it, you just go to this option and uncheck this setting. And you will also notice that right here you should have a little bit more space between the numbers and the activity bar. You can turn it on and off with this setting, glyph margin. Okay, so if you check this, you will see this space right here. And if you place your cursor above the space, you will see like a little red dot. Okay, but I will hide it and I just see the numbers. Awesome, you can really customize Visual Studio Code to your liking. So please take a moment to go over these settings after you've watched the video and make Visual Studio your own. And customization takes me to my next topic for the crash course, which is how you can change the theme and install extensions for Visual Studio Code. So let's get to that. I will close the files right here and I will focus on the activity bar because that is where you can click on this option, extensions. Extensions are super helpful because, like their name says, they extend the functionality of Visual Studio Code. And you can also customize the style of Visual Studio Code with some extensions. For example, the colors that I'm using right now, you will see that you don't have the same colors as me if you're working with the default themes, because I'm using Free Codecamp's dark theme. If you want to install it, if you like these colors, you just enter Free Codecamp, and that will show you this option. Free Codecamp Dark Theme. Free Codecamp Dark Theme for Visual Studio Code. You just click on it and you should see an option or a button to install the theme. I currently have it installed, so I see this option to uninstall. Once you install that theme, how do you assign it? Because the themes are not assigned automatically. You have to choose the theme. You have a default theme, a default set of colors, and you have to customize this. Where do you do it? Well, you go to File, then you go to Preferences, and click on Color Theme. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts Ctrl-K and Ctrl-T. Great! Now you can see all the different options that you have to customize your theme. You can see the Free Codecamp Dark theme that I'm using, and you can also see other themes that are installed with Visual Studio Code by default. You have a light theme, a quiet light, solarized light, abyss, dark, and Kimby dark. You also have Monokai, red, solarized dark, and high contrast. You should choose a theme that you like based on your personal preference. I used to like light themes. The background is sort of like white and light colors, but after spending some time with long coding sessions, I realized that really a dark theme is what your eyes need after 10-12 hours in the computer. Okay, so I really recommend a dark theme. Free Codecamp is a dark theme. You can also use Monokai, which is like brown, and you have many other choices. It's up to you to choose which one you like. But now you know how to customize it. Great, now that you know how to customize Visual Studio Code, it's time to see how you can run your code in Visual Studio Code with the terminal. We'll go over the terminal and the basic functionality. Okay, so let's dive into the terminal. Let's see how it works. For this example, for the terminal, I am going to create a JavaScript file, so you can review everything you've been learning so far. I will open the Explorer, and right here I will create a file. I will name the file script.js and press enter. Now I have my new JavaScript file. Let's write a line of code. Hello world. To run JavaScript in Visual Studio Code, you need to install Node.js, okay? You can just go to the website, download it, and install it if you want to. But this is just an example to show you how you can run your code in the terminal. Okay, so let's close the Explorer. We only need the JavaScript file for now. And let's open the terminal. we go to View, and then we click on Terminal. The shortcut, the keyboard shortcut for the terminal is Control plus the backtick. Okay, so you can use that to open the terminal. You can resize the terminal, and you can also change the font size of the terminal. You can see that right now I probably have a larger font size than what you are currently seeing on your Visual Studio Code. But for now, let's focus on how you can write the commands. By default, when you open the terminal, you will be at the folder that you currently have opened. Right now, in the Explorer, I have my YouTube videos folder. So you can see the path to that folder right here. And if you run a command, the command will be run inside that folder. Okay, so if any command needs a specific file, that file should be inside that folder. This is how you can open the terminal. You can also close the terminal right here with the X, close panel, and you can open it again with Control plus the backtick or right here. You can also add another terminal, start another terminal with the plus sign. You can remove or stop the terminal right here with the trash can. And if you click on the arrow, you can choose other types of different elements that you can open, like PowerShell, Command Prompt, Git Bash, JavaScript debug terminal, and you can split the terminal, okay? Those are really helpful options. For example, you might need to have two terminals open if you are running a React app and you also want to install a package from Node Package Manager. Those are scenarios where you will need to have multiple terminals opened. Okay, so let's see how you can run this script file. You enter the command, in this case it's node, and then the name of the file. This will be specific to the programming language or technology that you're working with. In this case, for JavaScript, we just need to write this command, and we see the output. Okay, so this is a sample of how you can work with the terminal. Now, there is a very important command. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this already, but it's really important, so I would like to mention it. If we create another folder right here, like my files, like we had before, we have this folder inside our YouTube videos folder. So if we want to move in the terminal, inside the terminal to this folder, we run the command cd and we write the name of the folder, like my files in this case. We press enter and now you can see that we are in this folder. We're inside this folder. So if we want to run a particular command inside this folder, we can do so with the cd command. Cd just means change directory, okay? It lets us change directory. And if we want to go up again, we want to go back to our main YouTube videos folder, we run cd and 2 dots. The dots will turn gray, that's totally okay. We press enter and now we're back to YouTube videos. Great! So now you know the basic commands for the terminal. Of course, there are hundreds of different commands for the terminal, but you have the basic idea of how you can work with it in Visual Studio Code. Right here, you also have different panels like problems, output, and the debug console. But I usually work with the terminal, okay? You can also add, right here, a command prompt and other different types of tools. You can split the terminal right here as well. Great, so it's time to show you some really super helpful shortcuts for Visual Studio Code that will really improve your productivity. Let's see. Let's first delete this folder, move it to the recycle bin, and we have the 3 files. If, for example, we want to format the entire file, let's say that we are not using the right indentation. Like in this case, let's say that we wrote an HTML file like this, which is super awful. You should never do this. It's not recommended because you can't see the structure of the file. But if we want to have a really quick fix, we can use the keyboard shortcut Shift Alt F. And you can see how this fixes the indentation of the file immediately. Okay, in this case, it's not indenting the head and body tags. That is one way to present your code. You could also indent them in your file. So if you want to do that, if you want to indent an entire block of code, what you would do is you would press Control plus the closing square bracket, like this. And to move the code one level of indentation to the left, you press Control plus the opening square bracket. Control plus the closing square bracket indents the code one level to the right. And Control plus the opening square bracket removes that indentation, that level of indentation. Okay, those are super helpful shortcuts. Now, if we want to change something, let's say that we have script and we have a particular variable, my variable, and we have an identifier like a variable name repeated throughout our code, and we want to rename it. How can we change that particular value? You can press Ctrl-Shift-L, and you will see that the variable or the identifier, it could be a function name, it could be a class name, it could be a variable name, will be selected throughout the file. And if you modify it like your variable, that identifier will be updated throughout your file. So that is super, super awesome, super helpful if you ever want to rename something in your code. Another helpful shortcut is Control-Tab and Tab. This will let you jump from one file to another with your keyboard. Let's say that we have 3 files opened, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and we don't want to click on the tabs to jump between files. What we do is we press Control-Tab and then another tab. When we press Control-Tab, this little menu or list of files that we have opened appears. And then with the next, click on Tab. We still have to keep Control pressed. We press Control-Tab and then we are still pressing Control and then Tab as many times as we need to reach our file. Like this, like this, like this. Okay, so that's also something that can save you a lot of time. You don't have to click on the mouse to reach that file. And another thing that I wanted to share with you is that you can work with version control directly within Visual Studio Code. If you click right here on source control, you will see this description. Let's read it. The folder currently open doesn't have a Git repository. I haven't initialized one. You can initialize a repository which will enable source control features powered by Git. You already have to have Git installed, okay? But Visual Studio Code, if you do have it installed, will work with the Git version that you're currently using. You can also directly publish this folder to a GitHub repository. Okay, so you can also publish it. Once published, you will have access to source code features powered by Git and GitHub. So you have 2 options. You can initialize a local repository, or you can publish the repository to GitHub. Let's initialize a repository. Okay, so Visual Studio Code together with Git have initialized a repository for us. Once you have that repository, Visual Studio Code will be incredibly helpful to track the changes that you've made to your project. In this case, we have 3 changes. Why? Because each file is untracked with the commits. Okay, we haven't made a commit to track these files. You can see this: untracked, untracked, untracked. Now, if we want to stage the changes, we just click on the plus icon. And we click on the plus icon and the plus icon, okay? Now we see that they change from this part, which says changes, to staged changes. These are the changes that will be committed if we write a commit message. Let me just readjust this. Now the U that you saw previously on the files changed to A. A means index added. Okay, the file has been added to the staging area. You can see the message index added right here if you hover over the letter. You can also unstage changes by clicking here on the little hyphen or dash icon. And now this may look initially like a search bar, but it's actually where you write the commit message. And if you click Control plus Enter, you are going to commit on the master branch. Let's say initial commit. If I click on Control plus Enter, that will create a commit. Okay? So now everything has been committed in the repository. Let's make some changes to the file. For example, let's add a second variable, my variable. We save the file with Control S, the shortcut, and now we see this on the Explorer. We see the letter M, which means modified. You will see this and this letter right here when you make changes to the file and those changes have not been committed. And you can also see the change, the line where the change occurred with these little bars next to the code. Green means that you added that line. Okay, so now if we go to source control, you see that we have changes. The changes were made in this file and we can stage those changes. And then we can just write the commit message, added a variable. We click on Control Enter, and now we don't have any changes to commit. They're all committed. Great, right here we have other options like View as Tree, we have Commit, we have Refresh, and we see other different options like Pull, Push, Clone. We can also have different options for the commits, changes, pull and push if you're working with a remote repository like GitHub. Branches, you also have options to merge branches, rebase branches, create branches from other branches, rename a branch, delete a branch, publish a branch. You can also add a remote if you're working with a GitHub repository or another remote repository, or remove it. You can also stash changes and create tags. And you can also show Git output, okay? If you want to learn more about Visual Studio Code, I also suggest reading the documentation. You go to code.visualstudio.com, the same website where we downloaded Visual Studio Code. You click on Docs, and right here you see the documentation. You see an overview for Get Started, User Guide, JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java, C++, Data Science, and other things. You will also find a very helpful article on keyboard shortcuts, like this. You have a shortcut reference sheet, you have key map extensions, and how to customize keyboard shortcuts. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked this crash course, I really appreciate your likes, and subscribe to my channel to be the first to know when I publish new videos. Have an awesome day and happy coding!